There's a difference between being paranoid and being right. I learned that the hard way. People think when you find out the truth, you feel relief. Like finally, your instincts are validated. But that's not what it feels like. It feels like someone just reached into your chest, ripped out your heart, and then asked why you were bleeding. My name's Chloe. I'm 30 years old, and for the last year, I thought I was in a healthy, committed relationship with, let's just call him Mark. Mark wasn't the kind of guy who swept into a room and made everyone stop to look at him. He wasn't loud or flashy, or the type who wore cologne so strong you could smell him before you saw him. He was steady, warm, safe. We met at a friend's rooftop birthday drinks. I just moved into the city after years in a quieter town, and my social circle was microscopic. I didn't even want to go. I'd been working all week. My heels were killing me, and I told myself I'd stay for one drink, smile for a few photos, and sneak out. But then I ended up next to him at the bar. He remembered my name the first time I said it, remembered my drink order without writing it down. We started talking about travel, and I mentioned a tiny coastal town my grandmother used to take me to as a kid. Without missing a beat, he told me he'd been there too, that he loved the quiet streets, the sound of waves hitting the rocks. The conversation never felt forced. He laughed at the right moments, asked questions like he actually cared about the answers. By the end of the night, my cheeks hurt from smiling. I left thinking, finally, someone who feels different. Our first few months together were a montage I could replay in my head like a movie. Coffee dates where he'd show up with my exact oat latte no sugar order before I even had to ask. Texts that actually had substance, not just WID or emojis. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, picking fresh bread and flowers. He wasn't perfect, no one is, but he was attentive. If I mentioned an offhand comment about my favorite chocolate or a podcast I liked, he'd bring it up weeks later. It felt like proof he was listening. It wasn't long before the conversations about us started. He'd joke about how we'd have the most laid-back wedding because neither of us could be bothered with drama. He'd tell me about the perfect little escape he'd go to when he needed to think. That same coastal town we'd talked about on the night we met. "One day," he said, "I'll take you there." I filed it away in my mind, smiling. But a few months before his birthday, I started noticing little things. His phone was always face down on the table now. He used to answer calls in front of me. Now, if it rang, he'd step outside or into another room. Plans we'd made would get canceled at the last minute with convincing reasons. A work meeting ran late. His friend was going through a breakup and needed him to be there for him. They weren't big enough to fight over. Not yet. But small things pile up, and I told myself I'd keep an eye on it without turning into that girlfriend. When his birthday rolled around, I decided I was going to do something big. I wanted to surprise him with a trip to that coastal town he'd always talked about. I spent weeks planning. Booked us a boutique hotel overlooking the water, balcony breakfasts, late-night walks under string lights in the harbor. I imagined his face lighting up when I told him. The morning of the trip, I left early. I'd arranged with the hotel to check in first, decorate the room with balloons and a cake, then text him to pack an overnight bag and meet me at the station. The train ride there felt electric. My stomach had that giddy twist you get when you know you're about to make someone's day. I checked my phone, scrolling through old photos of us, feeling proud of myself for pulling off something so thoughtful. When I arrived, the hotel lobby smelled like freshly baked bread. The receptionist greeted me with a warm smile, confirmed the booking, and handed me the key. The plan was going perfectly. Until I walked past the open-air cafe opposite the hotel. At first, I didn't even register it. My brain saw the back of his head, the familiar broad shoulders, the shirt I'd given him for Christmas. And then, it saw her. Long, dark hair, laughing at something he'd just whispered. Her hand on his arm like it belonged there. Mark wasn't just here already. He was here with someone else. I froze. My body didn't know whether to walk over, turn away, or just stand there and let the reality sink in. My phone buzzed in my hand, a text from him. "Morning. Beautiful. Can't wait to see you later." And that's when it hit me. I had no idea this surprise was about to blow my life apart. I didn't get here by being naive. After my last relationship ended, 3 years down the drain, cheated on by someone I thought I knew, I promised myself I'd never ignore red flags again. I told myself I'd rather be single forever than go through that hollow, gut punch feeling of finding out someone had been living a double life right under my nose. So when Mark came along, I was cautious. Not cold, not closed off, but careful. He didn't rush me. That was the first thing I noticed. He had a steady job in project management, lived in a clean, simple apartment, no messy exes calling at 2 a.m., no mysterious just friends who were clearly more than that. If anything, he seemed almost boring, in the best way. Mark wasn't trying to be someone he wasn't. He wasn't showing up with extravagant gestures or love-bombing me with constant texts. He'd check in during the day, but never in a way that made me feel smothered. If I was busy, he respected that. If I needed space, he didn't make me feel guilty. He made the effort with my people, too. My best friend Mia adored him. Said he was the first guy she'd met who didn't give her protective best friend alarm bells. My parents thought he was polite and well-spoken. Even my brother, who has an Olympic-level ability to dislike every guy I date, told me, he's all right. Which, coming from him, was basically a standing ovation. We built our own small world together. Friday nights were for trying out new takeout spots. Sunday mornings meant slow coffee in bed before walking to the park. We had this unspoken rule that whenever one of us cooked dinner, the other would clean up. No arguments. On cold nights, he'd make me tea exactly the way I liked it. 2 sugars, oat milk, no tea bag left in too long. We even managed a couple of weekend getaways. Nothing extravagant. A cabin by the lake in autumn, a cheap but charming Airbnb in the countryside. Every trip had its own little memory that made it ours. Getting caught in the rain and drying our clothes by the fire, staying up too late playing card games because the Wi-Fi was out. It was these little rituals, these ordinary but intimate moments, that built my trust. I wasn't just falling for a man. I was building a life with him, one small piece at a time. Of course, no relationship is perfect. There were tiny things, barely worth mentioning at the time, like the first time he canceled plans last minute. We'd been looking forward to dinner at this new place for weeks. Booked the table, picked the wine we were going to order in advance. An hour before, he texted that he had a work emergency and couldn't make it. He sounded stressed, apologetic, promised he'd make it up to me. I remember sitting on the couch in my dress and heels, staring at the takeout menu, debating whether to be annoyed or understanding. In the end, I told myself not to be paranoid. People have emergencies. He'd never given me a reason to doubt him before. That was the thing about Mark. He was consistent, dependable. The kind of man you picture when you hear the phrase settle down. I didn't know it yet, but that work emergency was the first hairline crack in the glass. Too small to notice, too easy to brush off. And maybe that's what made everything worse in the end. The fact that I had every reason to believe he was different. Every reason to think I was safe this time. I wasn't. It started small. It always does. A Tuesday night. Nothing special. I was at Mark's place, waiting for him to get back from another one of those late work meetings. I'd made pasta, lit a candle, something we'd done a dozen times before. While I was setting the table, I noticed his jacket draped over the back of the couch. That's when I saw it. A crumpled receipt sticking out of the inside pocket. I wasn't snooping. It was just there. It was from 2 nights earlier. Dinner for 2. A restaurant in a part of town he never mentioned going to. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was a work dinner. Maybe he'd been with a client. But then my eyes caught the timestamp. 9:47 p.m. Right in the middle of the night, he'd told me he was home early, too tired to go out. I remember just standing there, holding that flimsy slip of paper like it was radioactive. My brain immediately started building possibilities. Innocent ones. Plausible ones. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You fill in the blanks in a way that keeps the picture intact. When he walked in, I tried to be casual. I held up the receipt, half smiling like it was nothing. "What's this?" Mark didn't miss a beat. He glanced at it, shrugged. "Oh, that? Yeah, I grabbed dinner with Tom from work. You know, the one going through the divorce. He didn't want to eat alone." He said it so easily, so naturally, that for a moment, I believed him. But there was a flicker, a fraction of hesitation, in the way his eyes didn't quite meet mine when he said Tom's name. I let it go. not because I believed him entirely, but because I wanted to. The truth was still small enough to ignore, and ignoring it felt easier than tearing everything apart. 3 days later, my phone buzzed while I was in line at the grocery store. A number I didn't recognize. The message was short. "Hey, are you seeing Mark?" I stared at it, unsure how to answer. My first instinct was suspicion. Was this some scam? A wrong number? But before I could type back, another message came through. "You don't know me, but I think you should. I'm his girlfriend." I froze. Girlfriend? My heart slammed in my chest so hard it made my hands shake. I typed back, "I think you've got the wrong person." But she didn't hesitate. "We've been together for almost 3 years. I have no idea who you are, but I know you've been with him. I found your picture in his phone." The air around me shifted. The fluorescent lights above the checkout suddenly felt too bright. I could barely hear the cashier asking if I wanted a bag. I stepped out of line, clutching my phone like it was about to detonate. I wanted to say she was lying. I wanted to believe it was some kind of mistake. But deep down, I knew the receipt, the flicker in his eyes, the vague work emergencies. They were pieces of a puzzle I hadn't wanted to see. I asked her to call me. She did. Her voice was calm, almost eerily so. She told me his real schedule, his habits, how he'd spent holidays with her family. Every detail was a mirror image of the life I thought I had with him. Just flipped sideways, overlapping. It was like listening to someone describe my own relationship, but from inside another house. And that's when it hit me. In one sentence, my entire relationship turned into someone else's affair. I didn't sleep that night. It wasn't just the message, it was the way my brain kept circling it like a shark that had tasted blood. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the words again. "Are you seeing Mark?" I heard her voice in my head. Steady, certain, like she knew she was telling the truth. By morning, my stomach was in knots. My hands were cold. You know when you're about to confront someone, and you rehearse the conversation over and over, but every version ends with them either laughing in your face or storming out? That was me. Mark walked in that evening like it was any other day. Jacket off, shoes by the door, a kiss on my cheek, except I didn't lean into it this time. "I got a message from someone," I said, skipping the warm-up. "She says she's your girlfriend." He froze, just long enough for me to notice. Then his mouth curled into this disbelieving smile. "Wow," he said, chuckling like I'd just told him a bad rumor. Okay, I was wondering when this would happen. That laugh, that lightness, it didn't match the weight in my chest. According to him, she was just some girl he'd dated ages ago who couldn't let go. He said it like it was boring to even explain, like I was wasting his time with gossip. "I told you about her," he said, except, no, he hadn't. I would have remembered. "She's, unstable, the kind who keeps tabs on you online. Probably saw us post something and decided to stir things up." He didn't flinch, didn't stammer. He looked me right in the eye like he was telling the truth. And that's what messed with my head. "You're overreacting," he said, his voice soft now, like he was worried about me. "Don't let her drama get in your head. Don't let her ruin what we have." It wasn't an answer, it was a redirection. And it worked. For a minute. The thing is, when you love someone, you want to believe them. You want the version of the story where they're the good guy, the victim even, and all you have to do is trust them. But then came the comments. Subtle, meant to sound supportive. "I know it's hard for you to trust after what you've been through. I'm patient, but I can't keep proving myself forever." At first, they felt like reassurance. Later, I realized they were planting something, the idea that the problem was me, not him. When I told a couple of friends, the responses were split. Half leaned in, concerned. "That's sketchy, you should dig deeper." The other half tilted their heads. "Mark doesn't seem like that type. Are you sure she's not just jealous?" That's when the real doubt started. Not just in him, in myself. If enough people question your judgment, you start rewriting your own memories. Was the conversation exactly how I remembered it? Did she really sound confident? Or was I just projecting? Maybe she really was a jealous ex, and I was feeding into it. I tried again a week later over dinner. If she's lying, how does she know where we went on our trip? How does she have photos of me? Mark put down his fork slowly, like I'd just interrupted something important. Because she stalks me. She's probably been through my socials, maybe even followed us once or twice. That's the kind of thing she does. He said it so matter-of-factly that for a moment I felt sorry for him, like he was the one under attack. The problem with this kind of manipulation is it's not big, dramatic moments. It's the drip, drip, drip of doubt. One comment here. A disappointed look there. Over time, you stop asking questions. Not because you believe everything, but because you're too exhausted to keep fighting the fog. So I told myself I'd be smart. I'd watch, I'd wait, I'd collect my own proof instead of confronting him again. I thought the truth would eventually reveal itself. I had no idea how deep his lies ran, or how many people had been living in them alongside me. I started running our history in reverse, like someone scrubbing a video backward, frame by frame, looking for the exact moment the movie changed genres. It was all there. I'd just been too in love to see it. That business trip last winter where he went quiet for a whole day. He'd told me the site had bad reception. I'd believed him. I even remember reassuring him, "Don't worry, babe, I get it. Work comes first." But now I'm replaying it, and it wasn't just bad reception. It was complete silence. No texts, no calls, not even a stupid meme in my DMs. And when he finally did message back, it wasn't, "Sorry, the reception was awful." It was, "Hey, just got out of a crazy day." No apology. No acknowledgement of the gap. Like I was supposed to erase those empty hours from my memory. Then there was the time we had brunch plans with my sister. He called 30 minutes before to say he'd been called into a meeting. I remember standing there, fully dressed, makeup done, coffee cooling in my hand, telling him it was fine, that we'd reschedule. Except later, when I posted a story of me and my sister at brunch anyway, he didn't reply to it. At all. Just texted me that night like the day had never happened. Now, looking back, I realize he wasn't avoiding brunch. He was avoiding witnesses. I went digging. I told myself it was just to clear my mind, but I knew exactly what I was looking for. A crack big enough to shove the truth through. Buried in my messages from months ago, I found a thread where we were mid-conversation, planning a weekend away, and then nothing. Just stopped replying at 6:42 p.m. on a Friday. I remembered that night. I'd assumed he fell asleep early, but the next morning, instead of picking up the conversation, he texted, "Morning. Busy day ahead," like we'd never been talking at all. It didn't make sense at the time. It makes perfect sense now. Once you start connecting dots, you can't stop. The quick shower when I'd show up earlier than planned, the way he'd guide me out of restaurants faster when he thought he saw someone he knew, the unexplained urgency in his "Hey, can we rain check?" texts. Back then, I'd told myself it was work stress, bad timing, normal couple stuff. Now I know those weren't coincidences. They were intersections. Her world bumping into mine. I kept thinking about that woman's voice in the message. Are you seeing Mark? Not, did you just start dating him? Not, is this new? Like she already knew we'd been living parallel lives for longer than I'd even guessed. The sickest part? The memories that used to make me smile now feel contaminated. That trip to the lake where he was checking work emails for hours, probably checking her messages. The nights I thought he was too tired for me, he'd probably already given his energy to someone else. The truth didn't just ruin the present. It reached backward, rewrote every scene we'd ever had together. I wasn't the main character. I was the intermission. I didn't plan to meet her. I thought our one phone call was enough. Enough to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. Enough to prove to myself that the cracks weren't imaginary. But curiosity is dangerous. It doesn't stop at confirmation. It wants detail. It wants proof so solid you can't ever pretend it didn't happen. So, when she suggested we meet for coffee, I said yes. We picked a quiet spot. Corner table at a cafe that smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon. I got there early. I wanted to see her first, to have the moment of recognition before she had a chance to scan the room for me. When she walked in, I knew immediately. Not because she looked like the type he'd date, though she did, but because I recognized the expression. That slight tightness around the mouth, the guarded eyes. It's the look of someone who's been walking around for days with an unexploded bomb in her chest. We didn't bother with small talk. She sat down. We both wrapped our hands around our mugs like the heat might keep us from shaking. And she said, "Okay, let's compare." It started with dates. When we met him, when we started calling it official, the weekends away, the work trips, and with every overlap we found, my stomach twisted tighter. She wasn't some fling from years ago. She wasn't a mistake he made one night. She was me. The same version of me, just shifted sideways in his calendar. We even laughed at one point. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. I told her about the week in May when he'd flown to Scotland for a last-minute client. She nodded and said, "Yeah, he was here that week. We went to a concert on the Friday." She told me about the weekend in July when he'd been too sick to see her. That was the weekend he'd driven 3 hours to take me to a bed and breakfast by the coast. It wasn't cheating in the sense most people imagine, where you can separate the relationships into main and side. It was full double booking. 2 relationships running parallel like he'd cloned himself. Halfway through, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather notebook. I thought it was hers, but when she opened it, I recognized his handwriting. She'd found it in his desk. Inside, lists. Not romantic lists, logistics. There were dates, gifts, what each of us liked to eat, our friends' names, our family's birthdays. It was like reading a field manual for keeping 2 lives running without collision. And then she said it. The sentence that really drove it home. "We were engaged." I thought I'd misheard. "You mean you are engaged?" She shook her head. "We broke it off last week, but yes, engaged. Wedding date was set for next June." It felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water straight over me. Not because I hadn't suspected they were serious, I had, but because engaged meant she wasn't the side woman either. We were both the main, which meant neither of us was. I must have gone pale because she said gently, "I didn't know about you, not until that night I called. He told me you were a work friend, said you had problems, that you'd been leaning on him emotionally." I laughed then, a short, bitter sound. "Yeah, that's his move. Turn the other woman into the crazy one." We sat there, just staring into our coffee, letting the weight of it settle. And then the real gut punch landed. She told me he'd kept the engagement quiet. Only close family and a few friends knew. They'd already booked a venue. And this is where it twisted into something darker. The wedding was planned in the same coastal town he once told me was special to him. The same one he'd taken me to that summer, where he'd said, "I can see us here, years from now." Suddenly, it all made sense. I wasn't some accident he couldn't shake. I was the insurance policy. If the engagement blew up, if she walked, he'd have me. A ready-made plan B. Not because he loved me more, not because I was the one, because I was available. I left that cafe feeling hollow, like someone had scraped me out from the inside. All the anger I thought I'd feel. It was muted, replaced by something colder. He wasn't just dishonest, he was strategic. And that's a different kind of cruelty. I didn't text him, I didn't call, I just showed up. He opened the door, looking like he'd just woken up. Hair messy, t-shirt wrinkled, but his face, when he saw me, went still. That's the thing about liars. They don't need to hear what you're about to say to know they're caught. They can smell it in the air. I stepped past him before he could speak, dropped my bag on the coffee table, and laid it all out. Receipts, screenshots, messages, and finally, the engagement photos from her phone. Him in a gray suit, smiling, in a way I used to think was just for me. "Do you want to try telling me it's not what it looks like?" I asked. He sat down slowly like he was buying himself seconds. Then he ran his hand down his face and said, "I didn't want to lose either of you. Not sorry. Not I screwed up. Just that. Like I was supposed to be flattered I'd made it onto his short list." You were engaged, I said. You were planning a wedding while you were in my bed. He didn't even flinch. Yeah, but it's not what you think. Oh, please enlighten me, because from where I'm sitting, it's exactly what I think. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on mine like he thought sincerity would somehow rewrite history. She and I, it's complicated. The wedding is... It's still happening. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because my brain couldn't process anything else. Still happening? Yeah, he said. And then the words that finally, truly broke something in me. But it doesn't mean anything. Do you know how insane that sounds? He actually sat there and told me he was going to stand in front of his friends, his family, maybe God, and marry another woman. But I shouldn't take it personally. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at him. And in that silence, something clicked. Lies aren't accidents. They're strategies. Every story he'd told me, every excuse, every late-night text designed to keep me calm, it was all deliberate. Not sloppy, not impulsive, planned, managed, controlled. He didn't fall into this mess. He built it. I stood up, gathered the pile of evidence, and shoved it back in my bag. I hope you get exactly what you deserve, I told him. And for the first time all night, he looked nervous. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd rattled me. Because the truth is, he hadn't. Not anymore. He just reminded me that some people don't tell lies because they're afraid of the truth. They tell lies because the truth gets in the way of what they want. And he was exactly that kind of person. I didn't go home and fall apart. Not this time. I went home, blocked his number, deleted every photo, every thread of conversation. I didn't give myself the option to scroll back through it at 2 a.m., looking for the moment it went wrong. Because here's the truth. It didn't go wrong. It was wrong the entire time. I started therapy again. Not to figure out how to move on from him, but to rebuild trust in myself. Because the worst thing about being lied to isn't the lie. It's how you start second-guessing your own instincts. You remember every red flag you waved off, every late-night gut feeling you swallowed. And you swear to yourself you'll never ignore those alarms again. One night, months before this all happened, I'd written in my journal, I will never let someone hide me. I don't even remember why I wrote it. But now I do. If someone hides you, it's not because they value privacy. It's because they value options. I kept thinking about all the little moments that felt good at the time, but were actually cover stories. The weekend trips where he was too tired to go out. The dinners where his phone never left the table, screen down. The work calls that dragged past midnight. None of those were accidents. They were strategies. The hardest part wasn't losing him. It was realizing I'd never actually had him. I'd had the version he wanted me to see. The one who looked at me like I was the only one in the room. Because the other rooms were out of sight. I used to think I'd found a safe love. Something solid, dependable. But what I'd really found was someone skilled at living a double life. Someone who could hand out intimacy in equal portions without ever letting the plates touch. And that's the thing I carry with me now. That love isn't just about connection, it's about alignment. And if someone's story doesn't align with their actions, you don't have a relationship. You have a performance.